Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 8th of April 2026. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Councillor Williams. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I think I'm substituting for Councillor Maritime, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. So item 2, are the records of the meetings held on the 11th of March 2026 agreed? Item 3 on the agenda. I can confirm that there are no late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. My standard reply to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the independent group, but I was not involved in the representation submitted by the independent group tonight, nor I am a signatory on those representations. Those representations have been written by Councillor Pearce and signed by all councillors Crozier, Pearce and Sands only. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before moving on to the main part of the agenda, is it agreed by members that for agenda items 5 and 6, councillors Crozier, Pearce and Sands speak as ward members, and for agenda item 7, councillor Nestorov speaks as ward member? Thank you. So now we go on to our first planning application of the evening, agenda item 5, which is the land at Ratcliffe Highway. Hannah Gunner, Principal Planner, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Whoops. Okay, this application is for land at Ratcliffe Highway, and it's an outline application with all matters reserved except for access for up to 240 residential dwellings, including 25% affordable housing, new vehicular access from Ratcliffe Highway, open space, landscaping and associated works. The application is being appealed against non-determination. Therefore, the recommendation before you is what would have been proposed for consideration had the appeal not been lodged. At this point, I'd like to draw members' attention to the supplementary, which includes a rebuttal of the officer report that's been received from the independent group and has been attached to the supplementary in full. So the site here is shown outlined in red, and you can see how the site relates to the village of Who, which is situated predominantly to the east of the site, and also to Chatham to the west. And also you can see how it relates to the A228 or the Peninsula Way, which is a dual carriageway running up here, and the yellow roads being the main road network surrounding the site. This aerial photo is just a little ease to help ease and clarify where the site is. So you can see the main village of Who here to the east. With to the south of the site, you can see the Lee Academy 100 of Who. And then obviously you can see Chatham here. This is a 3D aerial image of the site. Just so you can see here, you can see this is the auto yard that's accessed off of Ratcliffe Highway, and you've got Cityway Health here. And then you can see the main village here, and this road here, coming around here, is Vision Avenue, which will form part of the presentation as we go on. And again, just in a sort of 3D aerial photograph of the site, so you can see how the site relates to Peninsula Way here and the Ratcliffe Highway, and also going forward onto the presentation that Madeline will do after this one, you can see the adjacent Taylor Wimpey site, which is land west of Who, that sits in here. So this is an extract from the emerging local plan, and it shows the proposed site allocations in and around the Who area. The application site here is shown as Triple H11, which you can see here where the cursor is. This is identified within the emerging local plan as residential land use for up to 240 dwellings. Oops. So this plan is the submitted development framework. So within this plan, we can see where the green infrastructure will lie here, which is predominantly to the north of the site and then to the south of the site with the green corridor along here and then more to the east. You can see this dotted orange line, which is an existing public right-of-way, which will be retained as a public right-of-way and improved as part of the scheme. And then there's the proposed vehicular access point off of Ratcliffe Highway up here, and then some indicative play areas within the site, shown as these sort of circular areas. This is the submitted land use and access parameter plan. And again, in the beige just shows the developable areas or the development areas within the application, and the green infrastructure areas. These green infrastructure areas are to include all SUDs, play areas, orchards, buffers and planting areas. And then we've got the primary road here, and then we've got connecting roads here because the development areas are within two separate parcels. And again, we can just see the public right-of-way and where that's situated in relation to the developed form. The site access strategy shows the visibility displays along the Ratcliffe Highway here and the potential pedestrian access point. It actually highlights within this plan that there is a bollard, which you'll see on the photos as we go through, which is to be removed or relocated as part of this application to allow for tactiles at a crossing point here. The primary route that's to run through the site is to link to the adjacent site and is envisaged to be pedestrian, cycle and bus route only, and would not be a through route or for general traffic. So I've added this slide just to show where all the public rights of way are that are mentioned within the report. So we've got specifically the RS 102, which is the public right-of-way that runs through the site here. And then we've got RS 100, which is down here to the south of Who, the 104 and the 105. So all of these are referred to within the Section 106 contribution requests within the case officer report. So just to sort of put it all into perspective so we can see the site. So this photograph has been taken from Tamarisk, or from the access road up to Tamarisk, where it crosses the footpath at the top. So we can see on the plan to the right-hand side here where the arrow is. So it looks across Main Road Who and right across to the site here. So this bottom picture here is sort of a zoomed-in version. So you can see the application site sitting here, and you can see properties on Vigeon Avenue here. This photograph, is taken from Main Road Who. So it's just east of the Chatham Main Road roundabout. So again, where the arrow is, you can see the roundabout here, and there's sort of an access gate into the fields here. So it's taken from that point looking across. And again, this is a view of the site from that point. So zoomed in, this is it here. And again, you can see the properties within Vigeon Avenue here. This is the public footpath that exists currently between numbers 69 and 71 Vigeon Avenue. So the footpath at the moment currently has sort of a cattle gate at the end, which you can see a bit clearer in the middle photograph. And this photograph on the right is sort of the viewpoint as you get to the cattle gate, looking out across the site. And actually you can see the sort of the Abbey Homes development, the Chatham development just in the distance there. This photograph is a panoramic image that's sort of been taken from the cattle gate. So you can see the rear garden fences of the properties in Vigeon Avenue. So this is just sort of a broad spectrum across the site from where it meets the footpath. So these last photographs are taken from the Ratcliffe Highway. So as you can see here, there's a footpath on this side of the road, and this is the bollard that was referred to in the site access strategy plan to be removed or relocated. So a crossing point with tactile paving is envisaged to be situated approximately this location. So This just shows obviously the Ratcliffe Highway to be quite a clear road, and there we can see the existing public right-of-way access point onto the site. So I'll just bring it back onto the development framework plan so you can just get a rough idea. So members' attention is drawn to the section 106 asks that are set out on page 82 of the report, which are required to deliver the infrastructure to make the site sustainable, and would have been the requirement of any approval had the council had the opportunity to make a decision on this application. Therefore, if officers were in a position to make a recommendation for members to decide, we would have been recommending approval subject to the imposition of the conditions that have been set out on the report and the 106 contributions as highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Now we'll move over to ward members. I believe Councillor Croser wanted to speak first. And then once you're ready, Councillor Croser, you'll have 5 minutes.
That's on, is it, Chair? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, since this application was first envisioned, the fundamental landscape of Medway's infrastructure strategy has suffered a catastrophic blow, the loss, of course, of the £170 million housing infrastructure grant from Homes England. The mitigations suggested in this report are basically no longer exists. To approve 240 more homes today without at least the guaranteed strategic road and rail improvements that the HIF was supposed to provide is not sustainable development. It's an invitation to gridlock. The Hoo Peninsula is not a typical urban extension. It is effectively an island with one umbilical cord that we know as Four Elms Hill. The Council's own data admits that our road infrastructure is already at or over capacity. This isn't just an inconvenience, it is a safety risk. When Four Elms Hill is blocked, the peninsula is cut off, emergency services are delayed, and thousands of residents are trapped. And my good friend, the planning officer, and I have seen that this week, indeed. The application does, of course, offer contributions to the Four Elms and Sandsborough roundabouts, but let's be honest, Madam Chair, adding a few £1,000s to a pot for a roundabout that is already failing without strategic financial backing to overhaul the entire network is a drop in the ocean that fails to mitigate the cumulative impacts of this and other pending developments to come. Madam Chair, the report suggests a 106 requirement for a road link to the boundary of the development for future bus linkages. This sounds good on paper, but it is a hollow promise. As you know, public transport on the peninsula is very poor. This application fails to provide a guaranteed immediate service enhancement. Instead, it offers a road to nowhere at the boundary, hoping that someone else at some other time will provide a bus. We cannot ask 240 new families to move in and expect them to use sustainable transport when the infrastructure for that transport does not exist. Madam Chair, without a guaranteed high-frequency bus service integrated from day one, every single one of these 240 homes will represent 2 additional cars fighting for space on Four Elms Hill. Members, look at the list of financial contributions. On the surface, they look significant, but they are piecemeal. We are seeing a slow-motion car crash of development-led infrastructure where we build the houses first and we pray the services will follow. Finally, Madam Chair, I acknowledge that this application before you is because of an appeal against non-determination. The officers suggest that they would have approved it, but I urge this committee to disagree. A would have approval that is based on outdated infrastructure assumptions is a strategic error. The loss of the £170 million grant is a material change in circumstances. The NPPF requires the development to be sustainable. Yet the strategic road improvements that were the literal foundation of the peninsula's growth plan, this development is unsustainable. It will push Four Elms Hill past breaking point and further isolate our residents. Furthermore, Madam Chair, we must look at the bigger picture. Given the sheer volume of planning applications already approved and in the pipeline for the Hoo Peninsula, the Council must take another look at the housing allocations in its draft local plan. We should be looking to allocate further in the urban areas where existing infrastructure can be upgraded more sustainably, and more importantly, where Section 106 funding can be utilised more efficiently and more effectively. We cannot keep pouring concrete onto a peninsula that the Council itself admits is over capacity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Croser. I believe now it's Councillor Pearce who has 5 minutes to speak once he's ready.
Oh, let's have a drink first. Hang on. Thank you, Chairperson and members of the committee. Tonight, I'm asking you all to stand up for Hoo and Chatham, to stand up for the adopted plan-led system, to stand up for the neighbourhood plan, and to refuse this application. Because when you strip away the jargon and the long list of conditions, the reality here is very simple. This report does not prove that this scheme is ready, or prove this site is sustainable, or prove this development is acceptable. In fact, the report admits in black and white the proposal conflicts with the adopted development plan. That should matter. The planning system should matter. Our communities are constantly told planning decisions must be adopted plan-led. Well, if that principle means anything at all, it must mean something tonight. Instead, this report leans too heavily on an emerging new local plan that is not adopted, not settled, not certain, and is currently in significant trouble, especially if you read the recently published initial queries letter from the examination inspectors. That is not a firm foundation, it's a gamble. You can't ask residents to accept the loss of countryside, including our much-loved and valued Chatham Valley, accept more pressure on overstretched roads and services, and accept real harm to local character on the basis of a plan that is still up in the air and is now unlikely to be found sound and adopted anytime soon. Considering access is being determined now, the transport case in this report is especially weak. Active Travel England initially recommended refusal and is currently not in a position to support this application. The report says the council is not currently able to secure the bus improvements the developer relies on. And yet somehow we are still being asked to believe this is a sustainable location. It is not enough to hope a bus service might appear one day. Hope is not a transport strategy. Nor should this committee accept a scheme that depends on an adjacent development site, Taylor Wimpey, delivering key sustainable connections. The report itself accepts that important parts of the movement strategy rely on neighbouring land and future infrastructure. This means the application in front of us is not sustainable on its own merits. That's absolutely clear. The only connection between the Gladman application and the rest of Hoo is a very narrow alleyway, incapable of accommodating both pedestrians and cyclists, and that leads to Vigeon Avenue. Then you have a proposed access onto a dangerous bendy section of Ratcliffe Highway with no footpath on the southern side of the road. The access arrangements for this site are completely ludicrous. You are rightly being asked to refuse the adjacent Taylor Wimpey application later this evening, and by doing so, it makes it impossible for this Gladman application to be deemed sustainable in any shape or form. Taylor Wimpey and Gladman disagree on the access arrangements for the spine road between the two sites. Gladman fundamentally needs access for all traffic for their transport case, it states it in there, whereas Taylor Wimpey wants buses only to prevent rat running. Members, this committee is not here to rubber stamp uncertainty. It's not here to approve first and ask questions later. And it's not here to tell residents that their neighbourhood plan, their countryside, and their legitimate concerns count for less than speculative promises and future conditions. This application is premature and the case is weak and is contradictory. Approval, therefore, is not justified. The recommendation relies on too many ifs, too many maybes, and too many details being kicked down the road. This is not sustainable development that complies with national policy and the existing development plan. It's sacrificial, reckless and unsustainable development, blindly chasing housing targets, and this site does not need to be developed in order for the council to meet local housing need. So I urge you all to send a clear message tonight. Defend the adopted development plan, defend the neighbourhood plan, defend the Who and Chatham community, reject this recommendation and refuse the application, and support the clear and robust case for dismissal at the non-determination appeal. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. And now we have Councillor Sands as ward member who has 5 minutes to speak.
I'll start again. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I urge you in the strongest possible terms to refuse this application. This is not just another housing proposal. This is an irreversible loss of open countryside on the Who Peninsula, a landscape that defines the character of this area and cannot be replaced once it's gone. The site sits within highly sensitive ecological setting, close to the international protected habitats along the Thames estuary. The hedgerows and the fields are not empty land, they are living, functional habitats. Once destroyed, they're lost forever. No amount of mitigation or replanting can truly create what has been taken decades, if not years, to establish. National policy is clear. Where there is uncertainty about the harm to protected habitats, permission must be refused. This is not a judgment call, it's a safeguard, and it exists for a reason. Beyond ecology, the proposal adds further pressure to a road network that is already struggling, as residents know the daily reality of congestion, limited access, and the growing strain on local services that this development would make worse. Members, I ask you to look at the bigger picture. Allowing this scheme would not be a one-off decision. It would set a precedent and open the door to further incremental losses of countryside, gradually eroding the very identity of the Who Peninsula. Yes, we are told we need housing, but not at any cost and not in the wrong place. The harm here is clear, significant and permanent. It outweighs the benefits. I ask you to stand with the residents, protect the landscape and refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. I now move over to members. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members who have just contributed to this discussion, and thank you to officers for the presentation. I just want to clarify one matter. We are being asked to make a decision on the basis that this has already been submitted to the inspectorate, planning inspectorate, because of non-determination. Can I just clarify why this has gone for such an appeal, and why the committee wasn't able to discuss it before that they went to the planning inspectorate?
Dave, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, thank you very much. Good question, and there are lots of members of the public who are asking the same question. And we have had 3 appeals. Well, we currently have 3 appeals relating to large-scale residential-led development, all of which will be heard by way of public inquiry in May and June of this year. So all 3 of those are a result of appeals against non-determination. As members know from recent committees, the first non-determination appeal related to a proposal considered by committee a few months ago for 800 homes plus a primary school at Wainscott. This application is and was one of a number of speculative applications proposals which have been submitted or about to be submitted to Medway Council. This highlights the huge, huge importance of having an up-to-date adopted local plan. The existing local plan is 2003 and was meant to run from 2003 to 2008. It is significantly out of date. But I will come back to the local plan again in just a minute. The Wainscott proposal is on a site that is not allocated in the emerging local plan. The applicant is arguing that the council does not have a 5-year housing land supply. That is correct. We've got 3.1 years. We're supposed to have 5 years. And that their site is available and ready for development. They appealed against non-determination as soon as they possibly could in the planning process, despite there being unresolved issues relating particularly to an objection from National Highways and no fundamental discussions on Section 106 mitigation matters. Why did they do that? They did so because once the local plan is adopted, it will make it far more difficult for large-scale, non-allocated residential-led applications to be granted on appeal. There is, and there was, therefore, a window of opportunity for them to lodge the appeal. And using the Roswell procedures, and Roswell is a way of speeding up appeals for residential-led large-scale applications going to public inquiry. So using those procedures, they get an early date for an inquiry and before the local plan examination. They chose to do that because that's their window of opportunity, and then negotiate on the outstanding issues as we move forward through the appeal process. In relation to the two applications that are before you tonight, Gladman and Wimpey, if I can refer to them as that, both parties there have been promoting their sites through the local plan process for some years, and quite properly so. And as part of the consortium of landowners and developers, they've been working together and then also in discussion with Medway Council to provide the necessary information to support an allocation in the emerging local plan. On the face of it, therefore, it could be considered to be a surprise that they have both appealed in advance of the local plan hearings. As part of that local plan work, the Council were working on an infrastructure delivery plan and the infrastructure and associated costs necessary to make potential allocations sustainable and acceptable, and hence had not been in a position to positively determine either application prior to the appeals being lodged. However, as Gladman do not own the land, it is possible that they have been forced to lodge an appeal due to a land contract matter. In relation to Wimpey, which is the next application, there may be a number of reasons for the appeals. The first is that they have been building in Who and wanted to be able to switch from one site to another in close proximity. They also recognise that their sites relates to the Gladman one, and that in terms of sustainable travel, the two sites work together, as we've heard from the ward councillors, and therefore appeals at similar times make sense. They will also be aware of the appeal at Wainscott, the Richborough application, as well as the Gladman appeal. And it is possible that the Wimpey board made a decision that they could be impacted by those appeals, and they wanted to make sure that they did not miss out. Finally, it was clear in discussions that we were not agreeing, this is in relation to Wimpey, that we were not agreeing over a number of matters of detail in relation to the application. And rather than engage further, including an independent design review, they may have decided to allow those matters to be heard through an appeal inquiry process. Members should note, contrary to what has appeared in the press, where they said that they felt that the application should have been taken to committee last year, that Wimpey submitted further information as recently as January of this year and then appealed. Members, I just want to move on if that's okay, Chairman. What is clear, as I have stated, is that Medway is under significant pressure on speculative applications, something we have been facing, but increasingly so, over the last 20 years. And as I said to you, the local plan was supposed to have been renewed back in 2008. The housing crisis is growing. It's growing nationally, and I'll touch back on that in a second. Scotland, indeed, have not only got a housing crisis, they've declared a housing emergency. I don't think we're far off the same happening in England. Now, this pressure on the speculative applications and being able to properly respond to it to ensure the right development in the right places with the right infrastructure, and that's a point that the ward councillors made very well in terms of the need for that infrastructure. That can only be satisfactorily addressed through the local plan process. Now, we have submitted the plan to the inspectors, and many will have seen the initial response from our inspectors and the interpretations of that response in the local media. The facts are that the response from the inspectors is not unusual. In the build-up to the submission, we have regularly engaged with officers at MHCLG and the Planning Advisory Service, PAS, to ensure that our direction of travel and spatial strategy were reasonable and sound. As part of that engagement, PAS organised for an experienced inspector in local plan matters to review our Reg 19 plan and documents. We met with him, he went through everything, and he provided a written response. We then addressed all his points. Following that, we were encouraged by MHCLG and PAS and agreed to follow the Inspectorate pre-submission checklist process, which is designed to make an initial assessment of potential draft submissions, sort out those that are not ready for submission, and give guidance to those that were nearly ready. We received guidance. Again, we followed all the guidance given to us prior to making their submission. Now, all local planning authorities who submit their local plans to the Inspectorate will receive an initial response from inspectors when those inspectors first go through the submission. Our response included no surprises to my team in terms of the issues raised and questions asked. And we will be responding by the 27th of April in terms of answering some points, clarifying what we've done and why in other aspects, and explaining what further steps we will be doing in the coming weeks. Now, we have discussed the letter from PINS with both our counsel. So we've got two barristers working with us. One who is a KC, one of the leading planning barristers in the country, and the other who is also exceptionally experienced in dealing with local plan examinations. They are working with us on the plan, and the council. We're working in relation. I've discussed with them, and I've also discussed with the council we're working with in relation to these appeals. All agree on the way forward. In relation to the appeals, the council remains content with the reference and the weighting attached to the emerging plan in the officers' reports in front of you, while our council, in terms of the local plan, is happy with the way we're moving forward in relation to the local plan. And Chair, I just want to say a couple of other things, if I can. And I appreciate everything that particularly Councillor Crozer said in relation to Section 106. It's not a perfect process. Planning is not a perfect process. Ideally, in a perfect world, we would have the infrastructure first and the development afterwards. But unfortunately, the infrastructure has got to be paid for, so some development comes forward, delivers the money to deliver that infrastructure. In relation to the urban area, again, I get that, and members will know through our local plan discussions that we've looked at the brownfield sites first before looking at others. We think we can get about 40% of our development on brownfield sites, but that's as much as we can get in a reasonable way. But we need to meet our housing need, and not everybody wants to live in a flat in the middle of a town. So we have to meet that housing need. So the suburban areas and the rural areas all have a role to play. And I appreciate the point in terms of housing need. We've got to find 1,636 dwellings a year in terms of a housing need. Our best ever year was 1,300 dwellings. Last year was around about 700. The only way we're going to meet our housing need is through an adopted local plan. Now, the local plan will provide for 24,500 homes. That's a lot of homes up to 2041. Members, I've made this clear in all of the public exhibitions I've done. I can't hide 24,500 homes. They're going to have an impact. What we need to do is look at the most sustainable sites for that, deliver the infrastructure that's necessary for that, and that means delivering the local plan. Otherwise, we will suffer, as we have done over the last 20 years, of planning by appeal. The final thing, Chair, and thank you for bearing with me, is just some facts, and Councillor Field, I'm sure you would probably have commented on this yourself. The average age of the first-time buyer in Medway is 37 years old. In the country, it's 34, but in the southeast, it's around about 37 years old. Tonight, I, and probably everybody in this room, are going to go home to our own homes. Tonight, 1,006 children in Medway will be in temporary accommodation. The number of families tonight with at least one child in temporary accommodation is 484. The number of households on the waiting list is 3,212. To put that in context, only 784 properties were let last year. 267 of them went to older people, which meant that only 500 went to singles, couples, or families. Average waiting time for a one-bedroom property is 18 months. For two-bedroom properties, it's over 18 months. For a three-bedroom properties, it's over 3 years. For a four-bedroom property, it's 4 years plus. For five-bedroom or above, there are none available. So members, there is a huge, huge housing need in Medway. And the best way to deal with that is through the local plan. And the best way to address the speculative house building is to, one, get a plan adopted, and two, to make sure that we are meeting our housing need by, in this case, agreeing the principle of sites allocated in the local plan. Now, we're recommending no objection to one, which is the Gladman one, but we are recommending objection to the other one, and Madeline will explain the reasons for that shortly. So it's a long-winded answer, Councillor Field, apologies, but hopefully I've answered your question.
Thank you, Dave, for that helpful information. What shocks me is the amount of children now in temporary accommodation, because that is rising rapidly. I think we've had it this committee less than a year ago, and it was 800 and something, so that number is going up quite fast. So, Councillor Williams, I now go over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard tonight the robust and passionate representations from the ward councillors. Also in the report, there's concerns raised by the Kent Wildlife Trust, Who Parish Council, Active Travel, and many local residents. I have quite a few concerns myself about this application. One, the loss of agriculture on Greenfields Lane. With food security in the news at the moment, the continuing loss of agricultural land cannot go on. Once it's gone, it has gone forever. There's also the infrastructure problems on the A228 and Four Elms, as it's well known with the traffic, and this being a rural site, it would put more traffic onto that road. And isn't to be noted that the Four Elms is an air quality management area as well, and this wouldn't do no good. Also, the existing bus services are inadequate out there, and also the lack of local services. So I have got concerns about this application, and I don't think I can support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now go over to Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Dave for his explanation and the officer's report. Two things come to mind immediately from Dave Harris. It's speculative. He admits it and says so quite categorically. Why should we be allowed to allow developers submit a speculative plan and for us to approve it? Secondly, from both the officer and from Dave Harris, they talk about an emerging local plan. Well, we haven't got one. We all know it's stalled. We all know there's lots of questions out there yet to be answered. And it states very clearly in that officer's report that possibly that local plan will never be seen or enacted, because once we've gone through the local government reorganisation, it's dead and buried. So why do we keep referring to an emerging local plan? Because it doesn't exist. There is only one plan, which is the neighbourhood plan. And that should take the positive weight for this application to its full extreme. I fully support what the officers have said in terms of their issues here, but that doesn't mean we should just approve it and ignore the issues. And I fully support the ward councillors as well in their determination to protect their area and their residents. And let's go on from that. Determination to protect their area and residents. I don't care about Scotland and its national emergency. I don't care about a national housing policy. I represent Medway, not a national basis, neither do I represent Scotland. So I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I spent many years in the last administration, and when we were looking at the local plan, and this local plan's been going on forever, it was quite apparent with the amount of housing we were looking at on the peninsula, it wasn't feasible without the HIF bid. Now, we don't have the HIF bid now. We were going to have trains. We've just given loads of planning at Ihelstow. The east of Who, the amount of houses there. Some of us were elected to look after green spaces, and we've tried over the years to do that. And I fully support the ward councillors on what they're trying to achieve on this application.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like some clarification in a minute from the officers as to Councillor Etheridge's remarks, because this worries me. As I understand it, the Government Department has asked us to continue to proceed with submitting our local plan to public examination, and the process is not interfered with by the local government review or reorganisation. So, I'd like to clarify that we are carrying on with the local plan. Secondly, a lot has been said about the HIF bid, the infrastructure funding. It wasn't me who opposed the infrastructure funding. I seem to remember the former MP had something to do with it. I want infrastructure funding to go with new housing, and let us look at what is contained in the report. The non-financial benefits include now 30% affordable homes. Had we considered this application before it went to non-determination, we would have asked for 30% affordable homes. There have been objections from the parish council in terms of sports facilities and pressure on health services. This report envisages £80,000, £311.20 towards the Who Sports Centre, and it also envisages up to £480,000, nearly £500,000, towards a primary care facility in Who, a healthy living centre. So, I'm often asked at these meetings, what about the GP surgeries, what about the health facilities, what about the infrastructure? It's there in the report, and cumulatively with other monies, this will help, and it will help with the Four Elms roundabout too. So I'm minded at the present time to support the application, but would appreciate clarification that our local plan is going ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Dave Harris, did you want to comment on that and answer it?
Chair, I just want to clarify. I thought I had been clear in terms of the emerging plan. Our barristers who are representing us on the local plan, our barrister who is representing us in relation to the appeals, are very clear that the emerging plan and the weight being attached to it in the officers' reports tonight. We have got the letter. We have submitted the local plan for examination. We have got the response from the inspectors. It's not an unusual response. They've asked clarification. They've asked some questions. They've asked for some further information. We will be providing all of that, and we expect to be examination later this year. I was meeting our barrister yesterday, and both of them are extremely experienced in dealing with local plans all around the country. And the one final thing I want to say, and maybe I'm getting a little bit emotional, and apologies for that, but the points I was saying in relation to housing need relate to Medway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Hammond-Dishi, did you indicate that you wanted to? Yeah, if you, I wasn't sure.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just want to say thank you to the officers for the report, and I can fully understand and empathise with the local councillors for their strong rebuttal to the plan. I think their sentiment is in the right place, and their appraisal of particularly the Four Elms Road, which I use that all the time, is true. I can understand that. My issue is about going from the vague ifs, buts to the specific in terms of mitigations for that road moving forward, because there's a lot of planning that's earmarked for the Hoo Peninsula. And also just a bit more clarity around, it's 2026 now, and we're still having discussions around HIF. And we know what happened to the HIF funding, 2026, and we're still talking about a neighborhood plan. So either there's a communication deficit here where people don't understand what's at play. So I would like clarification on an emergent local plan, as you've described, Dave, as well as a redundant local plan. Which one sets precedence? And if you can put that for the record, so we don't have to keep on having this debate about what's the point of having a local plan, because I think it's very, very important that we are very clear as to what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Has it got legs, or is it something that we're just pie in the sky? Thank you.
Dave, do you want to come in?
Chair, thank you very much. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Hammond-Dishi. The 2003 plan is out of date. The reason it's out of date is because, one, it's so long ago. Two, all the housing sites that it allocated have all been developed now and were developed back in between 2003 and 2008. We haven't got a 5-year housing land supply, and we fail our housing delivery test because it's under 75%. So the presumption of sustainable development applies. So all the policies in the existing adopted plan, i.e. the 2003 plan, all the policies in there which seek to control housing land supply are out of date, effectively null and void, all of those policies. You talk about the neighbourhood plan, and who has a very good and up-to-date neighbourhood plan? It doesn't allocate sites for development, but what it does do is highlight what's important in the settlement. It talks about the Chatham Valley and the importance of avoiding that coalescence between Hoo and Chatham, which we'll come on to more in relation to the Wimpy application. And it talks about the quality of development that's needed. If development comes forward, what quality it should be delivered. So all of those things are appropriate and are sound. What we're dealing with here is an outline application. So most of the neighbourhood plan will be applicable when we get to the reserve matters stage. But it is important that we get a new local plan in place to meet our housing needs. And Councillor Etheridge has picked me up on the use of the word speculative housing development. And we do have, and we have had a lot of applications coming forward. What we need to do to defend the ones which are not allocated in the emerging local plan, we need to support the ones which are allocated. Otherwise, it's open doors at appeal process. Then going back to the HIF process, and you rightly raised that, and Councillor Filmer raised this as well. At the time of the HIF proposal, £170 million, that was to support 12,000 homes out on the peninsula. That infrastructure bid was lost, and I don't want to get into the details of that. But now with this emerging local plan, what we're looking at is a significantly lower number of homes out on the peninsula, below half what was previously asked for. Now, in relation to infrastructure, that's something that my team have been working on as part of the local plan really, really hard, and it relates to that infrastructure delivery plan. Now, if I can maybe show you, talk to example, 10 years ago, the Wimpey site was subject to an appeal. It was dismissed on appeal, but the Section 106, which was signed at that time and agreed by the inspector, proposed to deliver £3,191,034, which equates to £6,017 per dwelling. What we're recommending here, both in relation to this application and the Wimpey application, this application will equate, in terms of Section 106s that you see outlined in 25, 26, 27, equates to £36,000 per dwelling. That's a lot more than 6,000. And that is needed to deliver the infrastructure that the peninsula and who deserve and need to provide the facilities to bring forward much needed housing. And it's much needed in Medway. It's much needed in Who as well. And if I can just say, I was at meetings over the last few years regarding community infrastructure. And there is a need for improved community infrastructure out on the peninsula. And the point that was made to me quite clearly by the public is that with the speculative housing that's come forward over the last 20 years, they've delivered their homes, but the infrastructure has not kept pace with that. Yes, it's delivered some. We've got primary schools, we've got a country park, we've got some things, but we haven't got what we would get through a local plan and through a Section 106, which is tied to a local plan, which is what this does, and delivers the much needed infrastructure to link to the much needed homes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Peake.
Nearly nodded it then. Thank you, Chair. Traffic. This is an issue that blights all of us. I live in Rochester. Nearly every single day that I drive somewhere, I'm blighted by traffic. So that I'm not going to be flippant about it because of that. I'm going to actually show sympathy. I can understand people's desire not to be somewhere where there's a lot of traffic. I do get that. And I wish there were easy answers to avoid this. So my question to you, Dave, is that can you, I know it's obviously there's a lot of information in the report, but could you say out aloud what your opinion is about the impact there's likely to be on the this level of traffic? And it was stated about a bottleneck. That's the first question. The second question, the amounts of money that are indicated on pages 25 to 27, if I heard correctly, somebody speaking tonight referred to them in quite dismissive tones as if these amounts of money are not even close to contributing in a really positive way. So could you comment on that comment as well? And before I finish, I feel like I'm having to say the same thing again. Now, we sit around these tables, we know how planning works. I apologise if it sounds condescending, I really don't mean it to be, but if you're not on planning or into politics or whatever, and you're a member of the public, I can get the levels of frustration, you know, things going against what you want, the anger, I understand all that, but it's not enough just to stand up and say, and you know, the councillors here know this, it's not enough to say, we don't like it, it is unpopular. That doesn't weigh for anything. Am I right in saying that if this goes to appeal, the overwhelming chances are that any application that is won on appeal will have a much, much worse situation when it comes to our ability to influence and get the money to get infrastructure in place? If I'm wrong, please comment on that. So my concern is, and I know it's not very attractive, the idea of maybe appearing to give in to the appeals process, but this is reality. If we do not, as this is what I'm repeating myself, we do not have very clear, strong planning reasons for turning this down, we know what is overwhelmingly likely to happen for all the talk and all the emotion, the end result. So I'm asking for some honesty about that end result and for people, including the people in the gallery, to realise what the likely consequence is going to be. Thank you.
Dave Harris, do you want to comment on that?
Chair, lots of questions there. Firstly, you're absolutely right, Councillor Peake, and members are as well. The southeast Medway, there are traffic problems everywhere in Medway, and the peninsula is no different to that. Councillor Crozer spoke very eloquently, but referred to the fact that when there is an accident at Four Elms Roundabout or on Four Elms Hill, it causes huge problems. Conversely, you could say wherever there's an accident in Medway, it will cause huge problems. But absolutely, Four Elms Roundabout is an issue. You've got anybody who knows it will know that from the traffic in the morning and in the evening, traffic coming from the London direction, big queues there. Traffic coming from the Sansparell direction, big queues there, and there can be an impact on traffic coming down Four Elms Hill as well. What we need to do is to address that issue in relation to Four Elms Roundabout. Now, we have worked up schemes on that. We've costed those schemes, and then what we've done is we've taken the cost of that and we've proportionally associated it with the developments which are allocated in the local plan, but also we're saying to those ones who are not allocated and are currently at appeal, you can't get away with it. If an inspector is going to allow this, you need to provide contributions towards that as well. But we are looking at those proportional contributions to deliver that much needed infrastructure improvements on the Four Elms Roundabout to enable us to deliver that development and to stop the point that Councillor Crozer quite rightly said, which is just everything coming to a standstill every day. So that's needed, and there's a proportional contribution from all of these. In relation to appeals and infrastructure asks, I can only advise you of, in relation to my 41 years experience, I'm sounding very old there, in relation to planning appeals and planning inquiries. I have never, in 41 years, and I think Pete, with his significant experience, but not 41 years, will also say that never as an inspector ever increased a Section 106 asked. What they do is they go through every ask and some are reduced. So they're never increased, never ever increased. If we're lucky, we'll get what we've asked for. But inspectors will go through every line by line, and they may reduce some or may not accept some at all. And then in relation to other applications, this is live streamed, this planning committee. There are developers, there are applicants watching this planning committee tonight. And if this application for a site which is allocated in the emerging local plan, if the principle of it is not agreed by committee tonight, that will be used against us at appeal on the basis that they will be saying, you've got to allow our sites, be it Richborough, be it other sites, be it Cates, be it All Hallows, be it Gleeson at Cliff, be it some of the, out in Rainham, some of the speculative homes that are coming forward there, which are not allocated. They will say, this council is not serious about dealing with its housing need. Therefore, Mr. or Mrs. Inspector, you should be allowing our development. Our chances of defending those other applications will be significantly reduced if you do not follow the recommendations tonight.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to come back. First of all, quickly for Councillor Peake, this was already gone to appeal. For Councillor Jones, if he hasn't read the report from the inspector regarding the proposed local plan, they refer to a number of documents being A, missing, B, out of date, or C, never been consulted on. And even more incredible, we'll talk about traveller sites. You need to read that because that's very interesting. And it carries on into next steps. And it says quite clearly, in terms of the examination and progress from here, much depends on the council's responses to this letter. You will have appreciated in this letter some significant concerns, and until we have the council's reply, we will not be in a position to have a definitive process that we anticipate for the next steps of the examination. We should say, though, that we anticipate the reply to this letter will lead to the submission of further new evidence and other documents which interested parties will not have the opportunity to comment. Consequently, before any hearings take place, a further consultation may be necessary. Therefore, you're looking at the next 6 months, 9 months of public consultation on those new documents. By that time, we'll be in LGR and it'll all be scrapped. So let's just get that very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. So I think there is irrefutable evidence that there is a housing crisis, which Dave, I think, has made that point clearly. So we do need to build houses. Now, I'm a homeowner in Medway, and I know it's very frustrating when you see all the traffic issues, the infrastructure issues. To me, the prudent approach seems to be not to be in limbo awaiting a perfect set of circumstances to exist before we have developments to go ahead, but it would be to inch along on all fronts so that developments can happen and then infrastructure can come in. Now, we're never going to have a grant of sort of unlimited funds that we can build all the roads we want and all the hospitals and all. It's always going to be a piecemeal way that the funding is allocated. But we can't just suspend everything, waiting for all of that to be in place before we approve further housing development. That's my thinking. It seems prudent to me. What the recommendation here is that you agree to some development, then attract funding for more infrastructure, and then go so on and so forth. It's sort of like a graduated approach. And in this, the Section 106 funding does seem to be allocated for nursery, youth club, health centres, which are the common things constituents tell us all the time, that where's the GP practice, where's the healthcare centre, and things like that. So that, to me, this does seem, on balance, to me, that things have been thought out. That being said, several times the assertion has been made that this application is directly in opposition to the neighbourhood plan. Now, I know neighbourhood plans are pretty important, and I've heard you, Dave, champion them several times. So what I want to understand is, could you please explain the validity and strength of the existing 2024 neighbourhood plan? Do you see this application undermining it? Does it contradict it? Does it undermine it? Post this development, what happens to the neighbourhood plan? Does it have enough standing? Because we've got to make sure that that came from our residents, from the local people. So it's important that we make sure, to whatever extent it can be, that we safeguard it. Yeah.
Dave, can come in?
Chair, thank you very much. And Councillor Campbell, you've spoke very, very well. You're absolutely right. The planning process is not perfect. It's far from perfect, and we don't live in a perfect environment at all. So what we must do is the best that we can, and deliver that the homes that much needed with the infrastructure which is desperately needed. You're absolutely also right in terms of the importance of neighbourhood plans. And you're right in terms of saying that I have sung their praises in the past, and we have some amazing neighbourhood plans. And the Who and Chatham one is an example of that. It's a very good, short, but it's a very good neighbourhood plan. And it needs to have significant weight in the planning process, as I think Councillor Pearce may have said. But we then come into the housing need and the emerging local plan, and the housing need must carry significant weight in the planning process. That's both for a private sale, also for the 30% affordable. And the emerging plan, in addition to that, brings added weight as well. So yes, it could be argued that by extending further to the west of Who, that it's contrary to an element of the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan, though, doesn't promote sites, but it does set out what is important. And the majority of the neighbourhood plan, in terms of the quality of what's aspired to and meeting needs, will be a matter for the reserve matters applications. So what I'm saying to you is, though, whilst it is contrary to the neighbourhood plan, and the neighbourhood plan carries significant weight, other considerations outbalance that.
Thank you, Dave. Now we have Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the officers as well for this detailed explanation of this application, and taking into account what the Chief Planning Officer has said as well as others have shared, which I accept. I'm looking at this just on the state of this application, and I've listened to the representations from the ward councillors as well as what the officers have said in the report. But my own feeling is that this should be almost taken into consideration with the next one, which is recommended for refusal by the officers. And I know they are different developers and there's different things that come up within the proposals, but just what Dave has said in terms of the neighbourhood plan, not allocating sites, I just don't like this application because it is merging it into Chatham. And just from a purely simple level like that, I just don't like the fact that these two separate communities would become one. And it's not a time to go into debate about the whole local plan that was adopted last year. But as has been said, it is emerging. These initial feedbacks from the planning inspectorate are quite serious and will take time. So at the moment, there's not enough within the application for this one for me to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, I absolutely do, and I understand the emotions here. What I would say, and I've deliberately called up that plan there. What you can see there is it is well related to who. To the south, you've got the school of 100 of who, plus you've got the primary school. But then you've also got Broad Street houses, which are a linear development moving towards Chatham. Now, the issue of coalescence was considered, albeit 10 years ago. And at that time, sorry, can I borrow the mouse, please? Is that possible? At that time, the inspector was considering this site here. So not this site, which is better related to that than the Wimpy one. But the inspector came to the view that although there would be harm to character and appearance, on its own, it would not outweigh the benefits of the development. And that was in relation to this development, which is closer to Chatham. What the inspector said, what the design review panel said, and what our own landscape consultants are saying, is that if you take Broad Street and you take Who, and that the defensible line, which links to the adopted, the emerging plan, is through a line here, and development to the east of that is acceptable in built terms. Members, what I'm saying to you is I'm working incredibly hard with my officers and with barristers to defend the decisions. I'm not going to be able to defend a refusal to this application. And I'm putting it as bluntly as that.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you for indulging me, Chair. I just forgot earlier. I just wanted to address the whole straw man argument that I see of the LGR looming on the horizon. I don't understand what you're proposing, Councillor Etheridge. Do we just suspend all planning considerations, all major developments, because LGR is coming down the line? I mean, From what I can see, consultations were held, expertise was involved, an emerging local plan was proposed. There's legal counsel involved in looking at that. It's been sent to the inspectorate. The process is happening. It's ongoing. Okay, so they've asked questions, and from what I can hear, they are being reviewed and addressed. Meanwhile, guidance has been sought from government. What do we do about an emerging local plan? Because Medway is not unique in that these considerations happening with LGR looming. The government has advised, please continue with your local plan process, which we are doing. To me, it sounds very irresponsible to just kind of, fold your hands and say, I'm sorry, LGR is coming, so we don't have any of these conversations. It's just not appropriate. That's just kicking the foot, sorry, excuse my non-English idioms, I'm not getting them right, but kicking the can down the road. It feels irresponsible to me. So I feel like we have to do the due diligence, and we have to carry forward as responsibly, as judiciously as we can, which is what it sounds to me is happening. Is it perfect? No. It's going to disrupt a lot of things, LGR, sure. But, we've faced situations like that before. I feel like this is a very appropriate way to progress. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'll go to Councillor Nang, but before I forget, because you missed the first bit of the presentation along with Councillor Hamilton, you two won't be able to vote on this application, but you can still ask questions, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. I just want to ask this question because if is the appeal live, that means that the appeal is still ongoing. So if the appeal is live, if we should approve it, can the inspector still dismiss it? What I'm saying that if the appeal is live, that means that it's ongoing. So we approving it, can the inspector dismiss it? We approve it and the inspector dismiss the approval. We as a committee, we approve it because it's already ongoing. So if you approve it, then the inspector will say, okay, I stand that I'm going to dismiss it. I'm not going to uphold it. So can that happen?
Councillor Lang, that's a good question. Apologies that I didn't quite understand the question initially, so my apologies to you. Yes, they've appealed, so the decision is not one for us. If you follow the officer's recommendation, then in terms of Medway Council as planning authority, we will be at the appeal discussing matters of infrastructure in Section 106. The appeal will still go ahead because there is what's called a Rule 6 party, which is the independent group, and they will be attending and they will be giving evidence at the inquiry, which the inspector will want to hear, and there will be the Gladman and the independent group will be effectively on opposing sides. But Medway Council, if you follow the recommendation, Medway Council will be taking a very limited role in the inquiry. Chair, sorry, I just wanted to say one thing further. This is basically, if you do not follow and I've never spoken so firmly to you before, so my apologies, members, but if you do not follow the officer's recommendation on this application, you're effectively, one, sending me to try and defend an appeal I can't defend, Pete can't defend, Hannah can't defend, because our recommendation is for no objection. So I've got to try and find a planning consultant who will take up a case, and I haven't spoken to one yet. I've also got a barrister who's saying to me, do not refuse this application. And part of the reason for that is because then in relation to the other appeals that we've got, you're then sending me into BAT. You're scoring an own goal, basically. You're then sending me in as effectively, if we can take a hockey parlance, you're then making me a goalie in a hockey match without any protective equipment. That's not a position I would like to be in, chairs and members.
Thank you, Dave. Any other member? Councillor Etheridge, sorry, I forgot about you.
Thank you very much for letting me come back. And I perfectly agree with Councillor Campbell that due diligence should be our key. And I'm not saying kick this can down the road. I've never said it. It's the government inspectors have said it. They're saying due diligence on a lot of things has not been completed. They're saying quite clearly documents are missing. They're saying quite clearly the information in there is out of date. And that's what they're saying, not me. And I'm just bringing it to your attention. And I really wish you'd all read it and you'd see for yourself. Who knows about the gypsy site being proposed at Upner, for instance, or one at Chatham?
Point.
Traveller's site then. Who knows about that? Where was the consultation
Sorry,
on that?
Point.
Where was the
Councillor
consultation on that?
Etheridge, can you wait a minute, please? Councillor Field?
Yeah, just a point of order. That intervention isn't relevant to the discussion of this planning application and straying into discussions that will be considered at other committees and at other junctures.
It's just I'm being accused of kicking a can down the road. I'm saying you should have read this document prior to this meeting, and then you would see exactly what it says.
Okay, can we just carry on with the
But
meeting now,
I'll
please?
stay there because I've made my point. I'm not kicking a can down the road. Government inspectors are, not me.
As Dave said earlier about the local plan, this is a normal process of what is happening, that it's not unusual for them to come back and ask for further information and documents. It happens to, I think, all of the people who are going through the local plan process. So is there any other member?
When we're told in full council it's already complete.
Okay, so with regards to this application, as has been said by Dave, there aren't really any reasons for refusal. It is allocated in the local plan as a to be built on, so and that has weight in the emerging local plan. As Dave said earlier, we've got 1,006 children in temporary accommodation now. That is going up and up. People need houses. Houses have got to go somewhere. As I've said previously, Gillingham took a lot. When I was a child, it was like a country road down there. Now we've got flats. Everyone has to take their own part of the housing that we need to get. So for that reason, I will be voting for this application. So now over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Excuse me?
Can we not have noise from the audience, please? Otherwise you have to leave.
Chair, land at Radcliffe Highway, Houston, Weber, Rochers Pond, Medway. The recommendation is that had an appeal against non-determination not been made, the council would have approved, subject to A, Section 106 agreement to secure the following: Little 1 non-financial and Little 2 financial as set out, and B, impose conditions 1 to 38 as set out in the report. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you. Those four officers... Oh, sorry, is that seconded? Is that seconded? Yeah, thank you. Those for the officers' recommendation of approval.
That's
Those
7, Chair.
against.
That's 5, Chair.
The application is therefore approved. So now we go on to agenda item 6, planning application, land west of Who. Madeline Mead, principal planner, will be presenting this application. So over to you, Madeline.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for land west of Who and is an outline with all matters reserved except for the access for the construction of up to 450 dwellings, 500 square metres of commercial floor space, 500 square metres for community use building and associated public open space, landscaping, drainage and earthworks. It should be noted that the applicant has appealed to the planning inspector against the council's non-determination of this application, and accordingly this scheme is being considered at committee to enable the council to confirm what would have been the decision had they been able to determine the application. Can I draw members' attention to a supplementary agenda and rebuttal to the officer's report has been received from the independent group, and a copy of this is attached to the supplementary agenda. So This is the site location. The site's outlined in red. As you can see, there's a main site here, and then just across the other side of the Ratcliffe Highway is another piece of land, which is ecological mitigation area. You've got the village of Hoo over to the east, and then you've got Chatham down here and wraps around. This is an aerial view of the site. So again, you've got Hoo village over here. Coming down here, you've got the Lee Academy, 100 of Hoo, and you've got some more linear development within the Hoo village there, along with Main Road Chatham as we go along around and up here. You've also got Grade 2 listed Mill House, which is just about here. This is 3D view of the whole site and the southwestern corner of the site. So as you can see, you've got the dwellings within Hoo here, and on this drawing, on this view, you've got the dwellings within Chatham. These are some views of the site. So this one is looking into the site and down towards Main Road, and then the rest of these, as you look at them, are moving north along the site up the Ratcliffe Highway. So this is part of the main parcel of the site, up Ratcliffe Highway, and here it is again, and then along this side is the ecological mitigation, which you can see here. So these photos were taken from an access off of Main Road. If you look down in the corner, there's an arrow which just shows it. It's just off of the Main Road roundabout. These show the bottom parcels of land. This area here is also part of the application site. Sorry, I've lost it. Yeah, as well as that, that's up where the Gladman site is up there. These are taken from Tamarisk Drive and along the ridge, so it's from the top of the drive. If you look at these drawings, that there is the Gladmans. There's a small piece of land here underneath the Gladmans, and then the rest of the site here. Again, that's the Gladmans area. This is a small piece of the land, and then it goes into the larger area. Looking directly down from the top of the Tamarisk Drive, you've got the application site here, and then you've got Dingate Ridge at the top here. And these again, these are just looking at the western corner of the site over here and here. This is an extract of the site allocation set out in the Merging Local Plan. The application site is identified as HHH8 for up to 450 dwellings and supporting commercial. This is it here. This extract shows all of the site allocations within the vicinity in orange. However, in each allocation, the orange does not indicate developable area, and each site allocation would be providing open space and landscaping buffers. And along here, the application proposes a footway cycleway using an existing farm track which runs between the 100 of Hoo Primary School and 100 of Hoo Academy, and would include upgrading existing farm track to provide a more direct walking route to the schools and the wider village of Hoo to improve sustainability. This is the proposed parameter plan. This shows the dark blue areas, which is here, 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 there, and along here, to be up to 3-storey residential. The pink area is commercial up to 3 stories in height, and the light blue is residential up to 2 stories in height. The grey area here is playing pitches, and brown stars propose allotments, and the blue are facades. The 3-storey residential elements are up to 12.6 metres in height, and the 3-storey commercial is up to 15.7 metres in height. This is concept on-site highway layout. So what it shows is the main spine road going in off the Main Road roundabout, and then connecting through into the Gladman site. And we'll provide pedestrian, cycle and bus route along here. You've got secondary access onto Ratcliffe Highway, and another access to serve the dwellings on the easternmost parcel of the land. The slide also shows the gas main crossing the site and a bridge across the Hoo Stream. These are proposed highway works, so the primary access into the site is by way of a fourth arm off of the main road roundabout. On this one, footway improvements on main road and would include signalised pedestrian crossing located approximately 30 metres from the site access road, realigning the carriageway to the south outside Broad Street cottages to accommodate a footway, a new 2-metre footway on the south side of main road. And this one just shows the access onto Ratcliffe Highway with a drop curb pedestrian crossing, which would take you to the existing footpath on the other side of Ratcliffe Highway. This is a concept plan within the merging local plan, and the application site runs along here. It's envisaged that a strategic green corridor would be provided in the western corner of the site. This is indicated by the green arrow. And this just shows the western corner of the site and the parameter plan. So the parameter plan shows the spine road going in, which would come off the roundabout, go up through the site into the Gladman site, and would propose residential development of up to 3 stories in here, along here. It would have the commercial element in here with some residential, 3 stories in height along there, and then 3 stories along here. So whilst in principle we consider that the development of the site for up to 450 dwellings and commercial community use is acceptable, due to the areas of proposed built development and heights of the buildings proposed within these areas that I've just indicated, it's considered that the development would fail to provide sufficient and effective landscape buffer capable of functioning as part of a strategic landscape corridor, and would also adversely and unnecessarily exacerbate landscape and visual impacts as a result of developing this site. The proposal would result in the perceived coalescence of Hoo and Chatham, and as a result would not successfully maintain the separate identity and character of those settlements. Members' attention is drawn to the section 106R on page 160, which are required to deliver the infrastructure to make the site sustainable, should the inspector be minded to approve. Should the appellants not agree to the suite of contribution mitigations, delegated authority is sought to impose a further reason for objection to the proposal. And therefore, if officers were in a position to make a recommendation for members' decision, we would have been recommending refusal, not on the principle, but on the lack of suitable landscape strategic gap between the settlements of Hoo and Chatham. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Etheridge, did you?
Thank the officer for her report. Unless
this-
anybody's got any contradictions to this.
We've got the ward members first. Sorry, I
Oh,
didn't
have we?
realise you were coming in on that. Sorry, Councillor Crozer, if you'd like to come up as ward member, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to start by saying that we, the ward councillors of Hoo and High Halstow, strongly support the officer's recommendation for refusal. The officers are absolutely correct. This proposal would lead to the total coalescence of Hoo and Chatham. It would destroy the strategic landscape corridor and erase the separate identities of our 2 settlements. This is a clear violation of the Hoo neighbourhood plan and the emerging local plan. However, while we agree with the landscape grounds for refusal, we believe there is a second equally critical reason that must be recorded. Again, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, the total failure of the transport infrastructure. Like the previous application, this scheme relies on a transport mitigation strategy that has been rendered obsolete. The applicant's transport assessment falls woefully short of sustainability. It ignores the reality that Medway has lost the £170 million infrastructure fund. Without that funding, the promised strategic developments to the improvements to the A228 and the rail link are gone. To approve 450 homes here is to knowingly contribute to severe cumulative impact on Four Elms Hill. The pinch point, it's the only way on and the only way off of the peninsula. The council already admits that it's overcapacity. Madam Chair, the applicant talks about active travel, yet Active Travel England cannot support this application. They have noted insufficient evidence. Look at the impact on our schools. The Lee Academy Trust has raised serious concerns about traffic, access and safety. We're talking about 450 families whose primary route out of the peninsula is a single road. The bus strategy mentioned is speculative at best. We cannot allow a developer to build a car-dependent community of 450 houses that will pour hundreds of extra vehicles onto a failing network every morning. We also cannot ignore the health and safety executive's concerns regarding the two strategic accident hazard pipelines on this site. While the applicant claims that they can work around them, it further demonstrates that this site is constrained, dangerous, and entirely unsuitable for a development of this density. When you combine high-pressure gas pipelines with a road network that cannot be evacuated in an emergency because of a gridlock at Four Elms Hill, you are creating a perfect storm of planning failure. Madam Chair, it is time for a reality check. We have seen a relentless tide of planning applications for the Hoo Peninsula, but this development, like the last, is the result of planning in crisis. Currently, the Council's draft local plan, which is before the inspector, seeks to place approximately 30% of Medway's entire 25,000 homes allocation to rural areas, the majority directly on the Hoo Peninsula. Let that figure sink in. This is a region defined by a single road constrained by major accident hazard pipelines and lacking the primary and secondary education capacity to support its current population. How can it be sustainable to force nearly a third of Medway's growth onto a peninsula that the council itself admits is already over capacity? The loss of the £170 million infrastructure fund gutted the only plan that made this volume of housing even remotely deliverable. We must stop this piecemeal approach. The council must re-evaluate these allocations in the draft local plan and shift the focus to urban areas where infrastructure is established, public transport is efficient, and investment can be utilised effectively to support existing communities rather than isolating new ones on a peninsula that has reached its breaking point. I urge the committee to uphold the recommendations for refusal on landscape grounds and to explicitly add transport and infrastructure capacity as a fundamental reason why this development is unsustainable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, if you would now like to come up to speak for 5 minutes.
Have a drink. Thank you, Chair, and members of the committee. I urge the committee to refuse this application, but more importantly, to do so firmly and with more robust reasons for refusal. The officer's recommendation to refuse is right, but the report is weaker than it should be, and that matters because the decision will be heavily tested and scrutinised at appeal. If we are going to defend our communities, we must do so on as many robust grounds as possible. The first weakness is obvious. The report says this site is outside the built confines of Hoo, in open countryside, and is in conflict with the development plan as a matter of principle. It also says the proposal is major housing outside the settlement boundary. But then, in the very refusal reason, it states the principle of residential-led development on the site is supported. That is a serious contradiction. You cannot say, on the one hand, this scheme conflicts with the development plan in principle, and then on the other hand, wave that away as though the principle is settled. It is not settled. It is not acceptable, and the committee should say so clearly. Second, the report gives too much comfort and weight to an emerging new local plan and not enough weight to the plan we already have. The emerging local plan is not adopted, not settled, not certain, and is currently in significant trouble. Therefore, it can only carry little weight, if not any. Whereas the Made Neighbourhood Plan is part of the statutory development plan and carries substantial planning weight, as can be seen from previous appeals elsewhere. The neighbourhood plan protects the separation of Who and Chattenden, protects the landscape, protects Chattenden Valley, and requires substantial transport solutions. This development would erode the gap between Who and Chattenden, and even the officer's own report accepts that the proposal would effectively close the gap, so from most viewpoints the settlements would have essentially coalesced and their separate identity would be lost forever. Third, the transport case in the officer's report is flawed. The previous appeal on this land was dismissed. The reasons for dismissal were not just about landscape. It was also because this is an unsustainable location, heavily dependent on the private car. Those structural problems have not magically disappeared and have not been overcome. In fact, the Design Southeast Assessment appendix to your committee report tonight states that the proposed development is dominated by car transport. Principle and access is fundamental with this application. Active Travel England is not in a position to support the development. There are still concerns about poor public transport, congestion, pedestrian safety, and whether key walking and cycling links are even genuinely usable. Yet the report still talks about an accessible location and gives positive transport weight. That is simply too optimistic and, quite frankly, contradictory. Fourth, too much is being kicked down the road. Drainage concerns are pushed to later detail. Ecology concerns are pushed to later conditions. Southern Water says there is an increased risk of foul flooding. Lovely. The Lower Medway Drainage Board says further clarification is required. And Kent Wildlife Trust says key mitigation may be unenforceable or ineffective. And even the report admits that major Section 106 contributions are necessary to make the scheme acceptable, while merely hoping they will be secured. That is not certainty. That is risky and reckless. Planning should be based on the evidence in front of us, not wishful thinking. So let's be honest about what this is. The wrong scheme, in the wrong form, in the wrong place. It would urbanise open countryside, squeeze the gap between Who and Chattenden, erode the Chattenden Valley, deepen car dependence, and load more pressure onto overloaded roads, schools, services and infrastructure already exceeding capacity. Members, the recommendation for refusal is correct, but the existing reason for refusal is only a starting point. Further reasons for refusal must be added, covering conflict with the development plan, along with poor access, transport, public transport, active travel, and impacts on the environment and ecology. The applicant has not overcome the reasons why the previous application was refused and the previous appeal was dismissed. So this application must be refused and can only be refused, but refuse it with all the robust reasons available to you tonight as a committee, and they do exist, they have been presented to you. This will give the Council the best case at non-determination appeal. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Sands, if you'd like to now come up.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you, members. Given that both of these applications have already been submitted to appeal on the grounds of non-determination, this committee and this council are no longer the decision makers. And the residents of Who and Chattenden, include many that are here tonight, are having their views virtually sidelined. The responsibility now for determining this application rests with the planning inspector. Chair, I strongly support the officers in this refusal. Who and Chattenden Parish Council have a neighbourhood plan enshrined in law, and I'm sure you all know that neighbourhood plans play a vital role in the planning system and should not be treated as secondary or an optional consideration. Once adopted, the neighbourhood plan becomes part of a statutory development plan, meaning it carries a legal status and must be taken into account when determining planning applications. What makes neighbourhood plans particularly important is that they are locally led, and the Who and Chattenden plan was diligently worked on through many hours, days, weeks, and a number of years. Very hard work by some parish councillors and residents, and they reflect the priorities, values and expectations of the community. And this plan was supported by a very strong mandate. And so it provides a clear expression of how local people expect the development to be shaped in their area. And I urge members to give significant weight to the policies within the Who and Chatham Neighbourhood Plan. In particular, the plan clearly supports the maintenance of a separation between Who and Chatham and the retention of important green buffers. In fact, they are a safeguard. They are there to preserve the distinct identity of both villages, and the loss of this separation would constitute a real piece of planning harm. As well as that, it would result in the merging of settlements and the further urbanisation of agricultural land, and it would not respect the neighbourhood plan and its identity. These developments want to circumnavigate the neighbourhood plan, as if it doesn't exist or it doesn't matter. But, Chair, it matters, and it matters a great deal. Chair, I've seen developers sneaking into my village, the village I was born in and still live in, and they've stole its heart. They've destroyed the community. And I know that once they get their way, they'll move on to another village. They don't care about medical care. They don't care about our children's education. They don't care about the destruction of our agricultural lands. What they do care about is profit. Our ancient village has been and continues to be targeted for mass housing developments, very often presented as a solution to homelessness and the answer to the growing demand to get families out of temporary accommodation. Chair, not all newly built housing is accessible to those that families in temporary accommodation. Even when affordable housing is included, limited availability and strict criteria can prevent most vulnerable individuals from benefiting. Chair, mass housing developments do not address the root cause of homelessness. Factors such as mass unemployment, mental health issues, addiction, and family breakdown all contribute to homelessness. Chair, without the adequate support services, simply providing housing may not be enough to ensure long-term stability. And Chair, a poorly planned development can also lead to social segregation, and where disadvantaged groups are concentrating in certain areas, reinforcing poverty and inequality. Members of a recent report on BBC Radio 5 stating that there were 998,000 empty homes in England, and approximately 265 of them were classed as long-term vacant, empty for 6 months. Yet once again, we are tonight discussing the greed of house builders and developers still wanting to build more and more houses. Chair, I said it of the last administration, and I will say it of this administration. Stand up to government, tell them that proposed housing numbers are simply not achievable without the complete destruction of rural England. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. And now go over to members. Councillor Etheridge, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. My apologies to the ward councillors diving in quickly. So I'm not going to repeat everything they've said, but basically all I wanted to say was that I perfectly agree with their thoughts on this, and that the one item for refusal is not strong enough. And I would strongly urge you and your Vice Chairman to take on board everything they said for additional reasons for refusal. Besides that, I fully support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
Thank you, officers, for your reports, and also thank you to the local councillors for their very impassioned dismissal of this proposal. I can fully understand where they're coming from. If we recall back to the 30th of March, Dave invited us to share our thoughts on a planning special meeting at Gunwharf, where we were discussing our views on planning. And we used what's called a Mentimeter. And if I'm correct, as we were voting on what matters the most to planning, green spaces came up quite a lot. It was peaking #1 for some questions. Transport infrastructure was peaking, as well as identity. And one thing I will say here is identity matters so much. And you can hear it in the voices of those who spoke. I just want to add one crucial bit that everyone seems to be missing. And that is, if you look at any new housing complex, development, 100 houses or more, those people who move there, if you were to speak to them a year after, 2 years after, they form an identity. What we're talking about here is quite clearly the social cohesion of two distinct identities, but they were once new. They've gone old over time. So anything new, we know will get old and form its own identity. So I'm with them 100% in terms of voting for refusal. I just want to put the assertion that over time, any new development will have an identity also assigned to it as well. Just want to add that. I think it's so important because we're not trying to paint a picture that any new development, these people come as if they're vanilla, as if they don't have personality, as if they cannot form a cohesive community. They will do, and they have done everywhere they have moved. So I'm with them 100% when it comes to refusing this application. I don't think it's right. It peaks on everything that we spoke against that matters to us. That was green spaces, identity, and infrastructure. So if that can be used to pad it out a bit more, I fully recommend that we do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I support the officer's recommendation for refusal for the reasons stated. But as Councillor Etheridge has said previously, I don't think it's a strong enough refusal just to do it on the reasons stated in the report. As the ward councillors have said, there's problems with the infrastructures, public transport services, possibly water problems. So I think I do agree wholly with the officer's recommendation, but I think it should be a bit stronger, using some of the reasons the ward council have come up with. And that's all I'm saying on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question, which really relates to around sustainable transport. And in your opinion, Dave, do you think it is viable for us to add something else in terms of the refusal around unsustainable transport infrastructure as it currently stands? I'm fully supportive. I think that the neighbourhood plan is an absolutely key policy and that it's been developed by local people. I think that we need to have a clear space between the two villages so that they have their own identities. I am a little concerned about all the comments about the people who may potentially move into the developments in the villages. They do choose to live there. They do want to become parts of the local community, and I think to present them as anything other than that would be unfair to people who choose to move there. That would just be my other comment that I'd like to make. But primarily, fully support the recommendation and the highlighting of the neighbourhood plan. But I'm concerned, are we able to add something in terms of unsustainable transport?
Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Chair, thank you very much. It's a good debate, and Councillor Pearce highlighted in terms of the previous appeal decision. And that was interesting because the previous appeal decision, in relation to the coalescence point and the landscape, said that, and I quote in the conclusion, the fundamental landscape function of Deangate and Cookham Farm Ridges in providing structure to landscape would not be compromised. And that's covering this development that we see before us. And he then says, so I regard the coalescence element of harm to character and appearance as relatively minor. Now, that was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, he was saying that that coalescence point was, not that important. But the appeal was dismissed, as Councillor Pearce rightly says, in relation to sustainable transport. But since then, 10 years is a long time, and a lot of things have happened. And one of them, which is very, very important, is a neighbourhood plan, as members have said and has been said. And the neighbourhood plan recognises certain things of importance. And one of them is the identity of Who and Chatham Dean as two separate areas. Now, that neighbourhood plan, I think as Councillor Sands quite rightly pointed out, received a significant vote of support, was developed by the local community, received a significant vote of support from them. It is something that they value, that separation, that identity of the two villages. And it's a part of the development plan. It should be given significant weight. Now, we've looked at this very carefully. We've got planning consultants, we've got landscape consultants, we had the design review people looking at it, and mine and Pete's and Madeleine's view was what Wimpy were proposing, and what you see in front of you here, wasn't sufficient to maintain the identity of those two settlements. It would result in the coalescence, the perception of coalescence, the physical enjoyment of that. So we raised concerns with Wimpy. Wimpy disagreed, and they feel that with the scheme there, that you will still see, with the hedge line, with the open space you see there, that there will still be a distinct physical separation. And our view is it's limited physical separation, but in terms of that perception, if you're walking around there, if you're cycling around there, if you're driving around there, you wouldn't have the perception, if it's built out like that, you wouldn't have the perception of two separate settlements. So we 100% agree with the parish council, we 100% agree with the neighbourhood plan that there needs to be a greater separation between the two. And separately, our landscape person, who's working with us in terms of the appeal, and the design review team have, can I borrow the mouse again, sorry, have looked at this. And what they've said, and it links into what the inspector did comment on, is that these fields in here help to provide that separation. So you've got this field 1, field 2 in here, provide that separation between Chatham Dean over here and Who here, irrespective of the fact that you've got this linear development coming out there. That then links across to the community park in here and this open space in there, and then back across this way. If I can go back to this plan, so you'll see this is the site that we're saying is part of that strategic gap coming across up to the Deangate Community Park here, but also back this way up towards Tamarisk and the community park that hopefully we will see developed on the other parts of Who. So that's really important, and the neighbourhood plan is clear on that, and we 100% agree. But going back to the second question, which is, are there other reasons for refusal? Is there a sustainable transport reason for refusal? The first thing I would say relates to, is this a strong reason for refusal in itself? I think it is. Our landscape consultant thinks it is. Our planning consultant thinks it is. And our barrister thinks it is. So it's a strong reason for refusal. And I do remember a lesson that I was taught, painfully taught, many years ago as a young planner, when I put up an application for refusal with one reason for refusal. And my boss then said, that's not sufficient. You need more than that. If you're going to hold that appeal, bung in 3 or 4 more ones. Find 3 or 4 more ones. What it did was the opposite to what he was saying. It weakened our case on appeal. When I had a strong reason for refusal, it was by trying to defend weaker reasons for refusal, it detracted from the strong reason for refusal. And I learnt that lesson very painfully at a public inquiry. And indeed, at another public inquiry, I had 4 reasons for refusal, 1 related to highways, 4 related to planning. I won the appeal, but we lost costs because we couldn't defend the highway reason for refusal. And that's another painful lesson I learnt. Now, in relation to the sustainable transport, yes, as Councillor Pearce quite rightly said, in the appeal decision 10 years ago, the key reason why that appeal was dismissed related to sustainable transport. What we've got here, though, is a scheme which linking to the Gladman scheme, which linking to the emerging local plan, starts to deliver a more sustainable form of development with the pedestrian cycle link coming down here. The two schools, you've got the primary school and you've got the second and the secondary school. The bus link going through the Gladman scheme and through this site down to here, linking to bus stops, and also the bus, a bus potentially coming through the site. Now, I've very carefully gone through a document today, which was referred to by the appeal inspector, which is about sustainable transport and distances that people are prepared to walk, distance that people are prepared to cycle. What is desirable, what is acceptable, and the inspector considered it on here. And what's shown now is more acceptable than what was shown 10 years ago. And our highways consultants are now not supporting a reason for refusal on sustainable transport. It's a long-winded answer, Councillor Hamilton, because it's a very good question. But I would strongly recommend, and so would our barrister, let's stick to the strength of our argument, which is in terms of that coalescence, that landscape impact, which our planning consultant, our landscape consultant, and our barrister firmly support, and is covered by the neighbourhood plan as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Before I get to the main point, I do want to say that I agree with Councillor Sand's concern about how a lot of homes are built and they're left empty for a very long time. Now, with my politics, I would be quite keen to actually do something about that. But it does raise a debate, doesn't it? How far we will be prepared to interfere into the private sector, privately owned. They are owned by a private company. So how far would we interfere in that? That's a debate for another time. I also would agree that, following to what my colleague said, it is an important point. In its own, it's not totally answers all concerns, but it is a valid point that areas do develop their own identity. Rather than look at outsiders as if they're going to change things in a negative way, I think a lot of people, when they, especially if they move to the countryside, that is a very deliberate decision. It's not because they just happen to be there and it's convenient. They go there because they want to take part. I'll give you an example of my own life. As a child in the 1960s, the house that my parents bought in the 1950s was part of the countryside, somewhere very near, if you know Essex at all, near South Woodford, and then Woodford, that area, there were still stables around when I was a kid growing up. But then it obviously took on its own identity, you know, large, spacious roads, very, very nice place to be. I want to make reference to what Councillor Pearce stated about robust reasons for planning. This, to me, really highlights the difference. And also what Councillor Sand said about the decision is now with the inspectorate officers. So bear all this in mind, in contrast to the previous item that we just had. I'm glad from that particular point of view, these two have come together, because unlike the previous one, this one has a clear planning reason for refusal, unlike the one before. It is not going to win with inspectors to say, no matter how angry and upset they may be, that is not a planning reason. It is not enough to say to them, we're going to champion that because it'll get to appeal, and the overwhelming chances are you're going to lose that appeal and you'd be worse off it, as you said, most probably less money. So with this, we actually have a more than fair chance that at appeal we will win our case because we have a specific planning reason for doing so. I was going to finish with asking whether it can be strengthened more, but I've just heard what you just said about that. So I don't know if your mind's close to the idea or there's room for debate at all now about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones. Oh, sorry, did you want to come in, Dave, first? Sorry.
No, so don't apologise, Chair. You're the chair. You're in control here. My apologies. Just in relation to that last question, Councillor Peake, The officer's report has been checked by our barrister who will be defending the appeal. He's worked with the officer on that reason for refusal, and he thinks that's the strongest reason that we can put forward.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Jones.
Chair, I don't think there's any need to take up the time of the committee now, because all I was going to say was that when I come to moving, I'll be moving the one reason for refusal. I was going to explain why, but the Chief Planning Officer has effectively done so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Thank you to officers and to the board members. You're probably going to make exactly the same point, but I'm going to ask the question from the reverse angle, because actually as a committee, we also need to bear in mind the decision we just made. We made the principle in terms of the access road, and that essentially that access road would be an access road to nothing if a development or an access road like this isn't delivered. I think we also note that the site is allocated in the local plan. I also want to note on page 160 to 162, there is an outline section 106 agreement, which has a substantive package of £15 million, which on the basis of the section 106 that we agreed as the subject in the previous matter. So the question is, again, because in this application, you have just stated clearly that there is one planning refusal, and that is about the shape and how we manage the environment and the difference between Chatham and who's separate settlements. So I think what I just want to confirm is, obviously, this is going to appeal. One decision of the appeal, even if we vote through, the recommendation for refusal could be to dismiss the appeal, to award costs. I just want to clarify again in that situation, because one of the key things that you state as Chief Planning Officer is balance, and that everything is balanced. And you also state about section 106 is a section of agreement that doesn't necessarily mitigate fully, but it provides some compensation for communities in terms of areas. So I just want to clarify in terms of the potential consequence of following this recommendation for refusal. Do we think that the section 106 would be delivered in full in terms of that, and the balance of the judgment of our hired counsel, that the strength of the argument in terms of one specific tailored discussion in terms of how the settlements are separated, that strength of that argument is sufficient, that what the likelihood is of it, not an appeal being upheld or dismissed is valid, if we look at the balance of benefits and costs to Medway, to local residents, but also to taxpayers as well.
Okay, Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Chair, thank you, and thank you to Councillor Field for that, because you've reminded me in terms of whether there is a potential second ground of refusal. If the applicants do not agree the package, as Madeleine put in her presentation and is in the report, if the applicants do not agree the package of Section 106 measures, there is a second reason for refusal there, because then that impacts on the sustainability of the site in terms of the infrastructure. So there's a potential there, but it depends whether or not the applicants agree that. So I'll be asking for, if you agree this, delegated authority to potentially add a second reason if they don't agree the package of Section 106. Then in relation to the reason for refusal, will we win on appeal? I can't give you a 100% guarantee on that. I think it's a very strong reason. I've pushed our landscape consultants, as has our barrister, on it. We've got exceptionally good landscape consultant. We've got an exceptionally good and a successful barrister in terms of he wins appeals for us. We think it's strong. We might not win. Part of the strength is actually the neighbourhood plan, actually, because that is of significant weight. It's an adopted plan, and it talks about that separation. So I'm confident that we will win. What I do know, though, is that if we lose, we won't go down with costs. We would only go down with costs if we've acted unreasonably. I don't think it's not an unreasonable reason for refusal. It's a reason for refusal that can be argued. Hopefully that helps, Councillor Field.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Okay, so I agree with the officer's reason for refusal as well, so I will be going with their recommendation. Now I move over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Vice Chair Councillor Jones will also be moving a maximum 5 minutes break after this item, please. Land west of Houston-Wearburg, Rochester. This scheme is being considered at committee to enable the council to confirm what would have been the decision had we been able to determine the application. I move that the application would have been refused on the ground set out in the report, and also give delegated authority to the Chief Planning Officer to add a reason for refusal if the applicant decides not to agree the Section 106 contributions. Looking partly at the legal officer, partly at the Chief Planning Officer, I assume that is okay. Thank you very much, Chair. I so move.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Those for the officer's recommendation for refusal.
That's 14, Chair.
Thank you. The application is therefore refused. We will now, as requested by Councillor Jones, go for a 5-minute break. Welcome back to tonight's Planning Committee. We're now going to move on to the last agenda item 7, which is planning application for 54 Woodlands Road. Who's presenting? Oh, Peter Hockney is presenting this application.
Thank you, Chair. I know I've been quiet so far today, but I'm still here. This application site relates to 54 Woodlands Road, which you can see outlined in red on the slide on the screen. Woodlands Road is that road there, with Cornwallis Avenue running alongside, and it's essentially onto the crossroads of the two roads. Just a bit of background on the application, which is also set out on page 187 of the agenda. There was an application in 2023 to construct a two-storey side extension, which was refused. A resubmitted proposal, which you can see here, which had a less sort of obtrusive and obvious impact as it was set further back from the front elevation. That was approved, as I say, in the 2024 application. Following that, there was a further application in 2024 for a lawful development certificate for a dormer window, which wraps around from the rear elevation here to the side elevation in that location. That lawful development certificate was approved because it was permitted development, and as a result we had no control over the size of or design of that dormer window. There were previous applications in relation to the change of use from a single dwelling to C2 children's home. One was refused based on the sort of poor layout and sort of lack of actual amenity space for the residents. And that has led us to where we are now with the current application. So the current application, as you can see, there is the permitted development dormer, which is under construction on the side elevation, and the proposal in front of members tonight is essentially for the minor alterations to the previously approved two-storey side extension and the permitted development dormer, essentially to allow the tie-in from the extension to the dormer window, because obviously they cannot be independently constructed because of the designs that were previously approved. In terms of the internal layout, again, the proposal is for a 4-bedroom children's care home with 3 sizable bedrooms on the first floor and a 4th bedroom in the loft space, essentially served by the dormer window, which is under construction. On the ground floor, there is a lounge kitchen area here with a separate lounge space as a separate area of living space in that location, with an office for the support worker in the front of the property. In terms of the recommendation, as you see from the report, we're recommending approval. The application has overcome the previous concerns in terms of the layout and the space afforded to the children that are to reside within the property. And as I say, the previous permissions on the site essentially give consent for the built development, which is coming forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We now move over to Ward Member Councillor Nestorov, who has 5 minutes to speak as Ward Member.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. As you can see from the previous application, I call this application the Frankenstein application because basically they apply for a lot of different things, whatever sticks, they build it and they adjust the next application on that basis. First of all, I want to say that residents have raised that the property may have been sold during the course of this application. If that's the case, then the ownership details before us are no longer accurate. In that situation, the correct certificate B must be updated and served to the new owner. And if that has not happened, this application may be procedurally flawed and could or should not be determined. In one of the documents, I guess the point officer has confirmed that the certificate was correct at submission, but it's not confirmed that this is still correct today. And this is one of my questions to the planning officer. If we have a new owner and he has not been served notice, to my understanding, this remains a live procedural issue. I guess you're going to answer that after my talk. Another issue for this application that I see is that the site is situated on a busy crossroad right next to Woodland Primary School. At school times, the roads are heavily congested with cars and children crossing. This proposal will add more traffic in and out of the site. The access point is very close to the pedestrian crossing and it's not safe. In my view, this would not meet today's safety standards. More traffic here means more risk for children and residents. About parking as well, every single time when I speak to any of the residents at the doorstep, one and the same issue always comes out, and that's about parking in the area. There is not enough parking, and the application states that this assisted living accommodation will have 12 staff. Obviously, they won't be there at the same time, but it would mean that they need to park their cars not only on the premises, but in the surrounding neighborhoods, which would create problems, especially during Hamfeka games and school runs. However, the most serious issue that I've seen, I read it in one of the letter of representation from our residents, and I will quote directly because they put it very, very well. The proposed ground floor features a large space, which is going to be 10 square meters, equipped with a full ensuite bathroom. There is no credible operational reason for a second lounge to have an ensuite in a home that already provides a primary lounge, a kitchen, diner, and 13.7 square meters of office space. Given that the previous application was refused for being a 5-bedroom unit, this is clearly a tactical move to operate as a 5-bedroom facility by stealth, thereby bypassing previous refusal reasons regarding over-occupancy and parking, end quote. This site has seen multiple applications over recent years. Almost all refused, some withdrawn, but all broadly similar. The changes between them are minor, while the overall impact remains the same. This creates a pattern of repeated application with little real change, what is often called planning by exhaustion. Under Section 70A of the Town and County Planning Act of 1990, the Council has the power to decline to determine application where like this, where nothing meaningful has changed. So the key question here is simple. What is different this time? Because in reality, very little is. In conclusion, given the repeated nature of this application with no meaningful change to address previous concern, this proposal remains unacceptable, and I ask members to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nestorov. Before going over to members, can you just clarify where the parking is, and where they come in and out?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the proposed parking spaces are in this location here. So there's 3 that are shown on the plan. 2 of them are underneath the first floor extension. I think in terms of the access in and out, it would be a would require some element of skill in terms of getting in and out correctly. But the fact remains is that the existing vehicle crossover and access exists at the moment and has done for a number of years. You can see again here from this photograph, and I think there's the drop curb, and from I think Councillor Nesterov's points that it is very close to the crossroads, and I don't disagree with that, but it exists at the moment and isn't part of this planning application.
Right, okay, thank you for clarifying, because yeah, it is very dangerous there because you've got the junction okay, and children crossing from the school. Any members? Yes, yeah, if you can come back on the questions, please.
Yeah, happy to come back on the other points Councillor Nesterov made as well. In terms of the ownership certificate, there is a requirement in the legislation that an ownership certificate be submitted at the time of validation. There isn't a requirement for that to be updated during the course of the application if circumstances change. Now, obviously, without drafting the legislation, you don't know the exact reason, but it is the purpose is obviously to notify owners that a planning application is going in on a site that they own. That's the reason why they have to serve notice before an application is submitted. If someone buys a property after the application is submitted, the application is part of public record at the time that they are purchasing it. So that's my surmisation as to why that updated process isn't required, because the application itself is part of public record. So any prospective owner would be aware of it. I've dealt with the access point, which I think Councillor Nesterov raised, and I think linked to that is that of parking. And you'll see from the aerial photograph here that the site and the parking area exists for the dwelling. The block plan shows the spaces within that. But members may also recall the application on this car park here to the rear of the convenience store on the corner, where members refused an application for 7 new flats on this car park. And the inspector allowed the appeal, considering that not only obviously the loss of the existing car park, but also any potential additional demand from the residents would not be sufficient to uphold a reason for refusal in that regard. So, as I say, I would stress that when members are considering this application, where the residents will all be children, there is an existing access to an existing area which provides some off-street parking for those workers that were to be, or that are to be working as part of the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Can you also clarify that all the room sizes are to the standard that they need to be?
They are, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the dormer, that's under permitted development rights, isn't it?
As much as I would like it not to be, it is.
Yeah, I just can't believe how it looks. It's awful. Okay, I think that was it. Any members of any questions? Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, it's more to do, it's probably not a planning question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's more to do with the fact that it's on the corner of a junction and it's proposed purpose is going to be a care home, but it's going to be a proposed care home for up to 4 children or young people with emotional and behavioural difficulties, located on the junction, on a busy junction. Is there any planning reason why that could be an issue?
In short, no. I think we're looking at obviously the use class. The use class is a C2 use. It's put forward, as you say, for that as a care facility for children and young people. There would highly likely to be children and young people on in the property as a family dwelling. I may suggest that those that are looked after by professionals, I think may in some cases have some additional attention to them in terms of the location element.
Thank you, Councillor Peake.
Sorry to be flippant, but is there any planning grounds to turn it down because it's so ugly?
It is actually, yeah.
I assume you are referring to the dormer window element, which, as I say, because it falls within the permitted development allowances, to do so would be highly significantly out of order in terms of the planning balance of that, because it's not a development that we have planning control over.
Councillor Jones.
Chair, just briefly to confirm, and if the officer said this and I missed it, I apologise, that the use as a children's home would still need Ofsted approval.
Yes, I was going to read out that little statement now after the member has spoken. Is there any other member? No. So yeah, as Councillor Jones just said, I'd just like to remind members that where the committee approves planning permission for children's care homes, the approval relates only to planning terms. The permission for the children's care home to operate is granted by Ofsted. So as much as I don't like this application, there basically aren't any reasons for refusal. So reluctantly, I will be voting for it, but now move over to Councillor Jones, Vice Chairperson.
Yeah, 54 Woodlands Road, Gillingham. Recommendation is approval with conditions 1 to 5 as set out in the report. I so move.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Those for the application?
That's 14, Chair.
Thank you. The application is therefore approved. Thank you everyone for tonight's planning committee. That's now the end. Good night.